we're doing this. You know what? I think I'm gonna get a drink of water. Here's the thing. What if it's you? What if you did it? You see, I've heard all these theories. The earth is flat. But then, what if the earth is round? You know, a lot of us don't have the means to prove either way. Do you know? And if you do, have you had first-hand account? That's the question. Not many Zetetists actually stop and ask that question. You know, mathematics and science do a really good job of fundamentally proving that the earth is round. But understanding mathematics and science attaches one merely to objective reality. Perhaps there's more than meets the eye. After all, you are the eye between both pi, round, and phi. You see, both of these irrational expressions exist within the spectrum of our being. What if it's you that decides? And knowledge itself is the concrete, the framework, the actual filling in the middle of the cake. Well, I mean, this begs the question. How much time have you stopped and thought about it? Okay, so you've thought about it. But what have you thought about? Have you thought about the things that fulfill? Oh my God, this is really tight. Have you thought about the things that fulfill your perspective? I'm pretty sure you do. I mean, that's my account of the matter. Certain things fulfill my way of perceiving it. And why would that be? Well, I guess after all, I am the one operating this crystal ship, as some might call it. You know, or perhaps I'm just a atomic being that, you know, it's just befuddling myself and wandering into walls, if you will. Because after all, I'm asking the question. Should we not start questioning everything? If after all, perhaps the Solifist has it right. You have a great deal more to interact with this environment than one could ever imagine. You see, let's observe the yin-yang as an example. Yes, there's two fundamental polarities that are seen, the colors, but there's only one circle. And all of this exists only because it is the opposite of nothing. All right. Introspectively stated, there is two polarities, both black and white. But then, within the white, there's black. And within the black, there's white. Oh look, it's also 404. Which changed to 405. Because that's my point right now. That in fact, it's not four positions, because the observer makes the fifth. By observing four positions, there's always a carrier wave over top the entire expression. Yes, there's north, east, south, and west. But how did we find ourselves in that position if there isn't both up and down? This begs the question. Perhaps we're in a six-segmented perspective. And if there's six, then we're perceiving it, and quite frankly, that brings us back to 0. We are now, once again, at the 7th position. 7 in the center. Well, some argue that our information and what we receive, think about, isn't something that's localized. It's actually merely seeming to be localized because of the way we operate our brains. Yeah, we're wireless communications. We're towers of perception. Perhaps that is the truth. Who am I to say? But I think introspection helps to lead the way into this thought that, yes, I exist, but quite clearly, something greater than me also exists. You see, this opens the doorway not from the 6th, nor the 7th, but in fact the 8th. Because both you and the extension of you both coexist. Is this not why the 8 can make an infinity sign? Is this not why, you more or less find yourself in a situation where you're constantly thinking, yes, this has happened to me once before. Or perhaps even, why are we all in this mess if we hadn't been able to perceive it ourselves to begin with? Most of the time, this is why art leads the expression. It is often said that poets are the fundamental building blocks of society. The dreamer actually begets the way. It's deep. It's a hard pill to swallow. Perhaps it's even far beyond what the average person can grasp. I'm not here to try and purport that I figured it out. I can just see that there's a ladder. There's dimensions involved in this equation. You see, this is possibly what the great mythos was talking about. We're not just objective beings. No, quite frankly, we're deciding at every moment if this experience is both objective or subjective, and we cast it either way. If that's the case, then maybe I do have a lot more to play in this role. But then again, if I forfeit that role to something else, someone else, or what some would say is some collective consciousness, yeah, at that point, I relinquish my responsibility. Maybe at that point, I'm at the low point of my existence. Is there another existence that co-seeds this? Well, dimensionality would explain that away. I mean, I often talk about the fact that if you were to walk up to a ladder, there's always an up. But there's not always a down. I mean, you've erected the ladder. Okay. So that implies that there's a sort of linear movement. But what if the ladder was already there before you arrived? You see, more like an elevator. An elevator has both up and down. And I guess after all, you don't have to utilize the elevator. You could just choose not to, go either direction. This is an ultimatum, though. The T intersection of life. When one finds themselves at a T intersection, it is quite often seen that we're leaving behind unity to beget a binary existence, duality, all the things that we've purported to hate in the last half decade. Well, I mean, this is the thing. The pains of our life give us also the brilliance. The very things that we love, I think, often are the very things that others hate. At the end of the day, perhaps it's only you that decides. I mean, what do you use your eyes for? What do you let in your ears? I mean, that would often explain what it is that you're repeating upon high for many others to gain your insight, your wisdom, hopefully you're not projecting. I mean, many people often decorate a concept that doesn't even exist within themselves. I'm not trying to, get off topic here, but one would argue that mankind has found themselves in sort of a snag hold. We're not able to see our own capabilities, or perhaps there's more to history that we've yet to uncover. Could be done nefariously. Subjective, thinking where one couldn't see one nor the other. But I think that often, sort of more classic thoughts of the matter, is that the schism of the, let's call it, don't want to take us off topic, but I'm talking about the schism of the schizophrenic. The problem is, perhaps they're not even as crazy as we think. I mean, I know we think we have it all figured out. I look around, thoughts come to my mind that I know what my environment's like, and I believe those things to be there. But the very question is, like the Higgs boson, did I not believe them forcefully enough for them to resist space and time? You see, alright, unfortunately we must continue where we left off. The battery died, and quite frankly, I'm not too happy about it. Alright, so here's the deal. I'm just making this observation. The Higgs boson, particle or wave. I know I'm taking a neutral stance. This is always the most uncomfortable. People will tell you it's the most comfortable. But quite frankly, you'll notice if you take a lot of time to introspectively look at it. No, the middle path is always the least comfortable. There's big groups on either side. They love to collectively hang out and congregate. Well, so be it. But the discerning individual, the one that has common sense intact, uses critical thinking, exercises both left and right principles to arrive at the most reasonable, sensible concept in the moment. Consider how, by being too campy or one-sided, one fails to see the nuance, or would often subside their own opinions for another's. By standing strongly in the middle, one can find a new perspective, one where they dynamically adjust their opinion based on what they feel inside, not what they feel outside. As nuanced as it is, it still is the fundamental way to find in clarity, find inner peace and sanctitude. But although I would openly admit, it seems to be the path of the hermit. Well, we find ourselves at a conundrum. We either take a side and polarize ourselves one way or another, or we stay true to ourselves, but find ourselves independent and alone. Perhaps I would always choose a side. But again, there's another position. Just like we were speaking of with dimensions. The other dimension to the argument is even in the neutral position. There's different perspectives. Such as, you can stand independent in the middle, mainly for purpose alone. But again, another would stand in the middle for merely the discretion of the moment. You see, if somebody chooses not to politicize their perspective or address it to a party or a camp or groupthink of any ideal for that matter, they'll find themselves arriving at this situation where they're the ones that decide the internal dialogue. It's escaping the external. If the internal dialogue is actually the one that we should be listening to, that makes us feel so independent, so alone. Well, is it designed that way? Perhaps. The system at large doesn't like independent thinking. Grassroots societies, people that have fundamentally independent thought on every decision. What do you think? How do you feel about that matter? You see, these are the things that to me matter the most. But when you're involved in a camp or one-sided policies, you'll find yourself, buried deep in the argument. We're looking at a world with both flat earth and a round plane. A flat earth, which is, not really necessarily flat. I mean, we can see mountains, we can see lots of contour. Do we know exactly what happens when you extrapolate a large distance? Absolutely not. This is where we arrive at perhaps a round perspective. Again, is it aperture? Are we not applying our own lens to the situation because it makes more sense to find it all as a closed system? One that exists in a vast amount of space? You see, once again, we don't know. This is something that my research personally has allowed me to elaborate on. It would seem that syncretism and this idea of the mystics were constantly fighting at odds. Isn't politics itself exactly like that? Red, blue, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal. I mean, just decorate it with your own national appeal and you'll know exactly what I mean. There's probably 80,000 hours on the internet of both flat earth debunkery, and there's probably just as much going the other direction. I don't hear anybody making the argument that they both exist. Oh, how foolish, right? But what if we exist between two-dimensional expressions of ourself? One temporal and one bit more spatial. You see, is it a particle or is it a wave? It's you that decided that, isn't it? Perhaps you are the I between pi and phi, or phi. You see, the mystical nature of your own being is very much untapped. We've all experienced coincidence. Some of us more than others. I don't even want to begin to tell you some of my tales. It matters not. It seems as though this expression is left up to the eye of the beholder once again. I could tell you fantastical tales, and I quite frankly would be happy to. But this doesn't matter if I've experienced these things. You won't be able to put any proof to it. From what I've seen, it really doesn't matter what I believe. What for you? If I can persuade you, perhaps, but when it comes to something so fundamental, so core, as that the outside world is actually, as the mystical Vedics, ancient civilizations, in my opinion, we're trying to project. It's the concept that the inner dialogue is really the same as the external. I know, you've heard this all before. But what am I, a Gnostic? What do I think, I'm God? Or are we all gods? These questions, they often have themselves in a particular box, we'll put it. Yeah. It seems like you got it all figured out, right? Yeah, but you don't, because even when you stop and you think about it, there's no way for somebody to fundamentally prove that one isn't deciding which channel they're on. Does the tree, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? I'm sure I'm paraphrasing and making it a debauchery of the original quote, but it's the gist of it that matters, in my opinion. Okay, so we've been told, of course it does. I mean, Google Earth, Google Maps rather, just take a look. We can see a very vast plane of things occurring that far exceed our current perspective. Okay. But what if it's much like a computer? What if we're rendering those things? What if we're putting them into existence? Or, which I'm even more apt to personally believe, if we want to get into my perspective, perhaps there's just a finite number of channels. The bands of the different frequencies. Perhaps if you're untuned in one way, you adjust to that frequency. I know this is getting heavy. The outside world and frequency and vibration, but hey, come on. Everything's vibrating. We're told of string theory, we're told of how actually, what is it, 98% of the world is empty space. We're just seeing the atoms in motion. So quite frankly, what is this? Do we have a co-relative experience with the environment we're in? Well, my research says yes. But again, this is me putting my flavor, my perspective, and my appeal to the environment. Perhaps in your world, everything is stapled down, fundamental. The laws of causal reality just make sense. And you've never seen a coincidence in your life. You've never seen something that's so astronomically improbable. We've got these blanks filled in for us. The sort of chemistry set that designed that it's akin to winning the lottery. You see, finite math can show you probability. And the right person would start asking probability questions. Again, I think it's quite interesting that if you're a mathematician, if you're a person living entrenched in objective reality, you aren't going to find much of that. In fact, reality is going to decorate itself accordingly. You are the perspective that exists between the two polarities. It's though you've got 1 foot in the water and 1 foot out. You're embarking on the voyage, but you're staying home. Your brain is imagining the horizon, but you haven't seen it yet. Okay. Well, it perhaps adds a third perspective, doesn't it? That both parties are right or both wrong. Sure seems like you get to decide. At the end of the day, if you just destroy this video, give it a thumbs down, move on to the next thing. Yeah, you've spoke your mind. But do you get to project like that? Like, you've allowed yourself to project like that. You can't maybe give the possibility that there's more introspective, reflexive elements going on in the world around you. And again, like I said before, it's very possible. It's not as simple as you think. I've heard everybody say, oh, so it's an infinite possibility if you're a Gnostic that, the outside world is somehow, your own imagination. No, that's solipsism. And the sophist sees the world as a game, as a mere simulation. It's possible that with dimensionality, what we see in virtual reality, these simulations, if you will, are mere projections beneath us, whereas projections from above would be much different. I mean, Carl Sagan talked about the Flatlander and how, the cross-sections of a three-dimensional being would look entirely gaseous and perhaps obtuse. Again, because this is only a figurative example, it doesn't exactly exist. But we can see into the window of fifth dimensional, sixth dimensional, seventh dimensional being relationships because, well, first of all, we have, artistic interpretations like Escher that show us a relationship with higher dimensional thinking. In this case, when you're looking at Escher, you're looking at a, you're looking at an optical illusion. It's of course an optical illusion, but it's not an illusion. The word illusion implies that it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist on this dimensional existence. It exists. We can perceive it. We see it. Now, to dig deeper, one must use computer-aided drawings. Now we can see the Vo solid or void. We can see sixth dimensional, basically meta properties of dimensional existence beyond ours. Remembering when we went back to that yin and yang principle, we were looking at something externally and we added a fifth dimension. I mean, it's true. You have the black, you have the white, you have the white within the black, and then the black within the white. If you were to spin that yin yang, you would have a ring, a gray pulsating ring. Well, the four positions didn't change of the original drawing, but you've managed to utilize fifth dimensional experience, one that exists on top of the other four, much like we do. You see, we're the ones that decide how we perceive this reality, whether it's this way or that. For me, this is why I choose quantum politic. The idea that the dynamic expression of each individual can provide a more accurate expression to the whole. This implies that, corruption aside, of course, that if there was a true litmus to all people, all thinking, all things, that one could actually extrapolate true meaning, true thinking, and of course, the general appeal of everything. In my opinion, this would franchise the homeless person, give them purpose, meaning. Every person would be equal, at least in the terms of the deciding factor. When we look at this existence, perhaps that's more reflexive of how we are and how we think. this campy or left-right thinking doesn't actually, pan out to how we think in the whole. I mean, it seems to me it's merely a pigeonhole or a place that we can get comfortable with each other and sort of swim amongst one another. Again, I'm not here to suggest that I've had it easy by taking a centrist appeal. Everybody on the right tells you that's a liberal movement. Everybody on the left, you know what? You're nothing like us. Why don't you go ahead and hang out with those conservatives? This is, of course, a Canadian opinion, but we could use the same with Democrat and Republican. Oh yes, walking the fence, it's so easy. No, actually, interceptive concepts that one, utilizes their internal dialogue to project to the masses is fundamentally more difficult. It means you cannot get your information from a third party. Yeah. That's so deep. I mean, who's not getting their information from a third party? Right now. Who's not getting their information from a third party? Pretty much everybody, I think, gets their information from a third party. But the fundamental question is, you know what you think. You don't need to have somebody else push their opinions upon you too heavily. They have something to sell. I mean, we can shift at all times. Sorry, itchy nose. No, we can shift at all times. We can decide what side we're on. To me, you've got square wave, saw wave, and sine wave. One would argue it's the snake, alternating current, the Milky Way. Okay, or is it the sun, solar, lunar cycles on the flat plane, for example? They both have independent, accurately introspective perspectives. Enough that one could create wars over it, I believe. I've heard so many decent arguments from either side of the panel. But you see, everything goes back to pathological arguments. What happened to logos? Only the truth speaks for itself, right? So if people could avoid their sort of personal biases, which is difficult because it's getting so heated at this point, these debates, they might find that the opposition has a lot to offer. This is what's so hilarious. This world we live in, what if we're decorating it? I know, it's too heavy. Here we have a Gnostic, right? And Sean's a Gnostic. But gnosis, right? We all have these functions. Within gnosis, there's this concept of it being inverse to knowledge. It's coming to you instead of, something that you've developed from your past and accredited and can acclaim, like one would purport knowledge to have. Gnosis is a different type of flow state, if you will. It has to do with monitoring the patterns and the sort of elements of temporal reality. An instant begets an interval, begets succession, begets durance, begets causal reality, and from there we expand onto things beyond time. Oh, I know it's heavy, but quite frankly, in objective reality, we can see that dimensions exist beyond ours as well. Theoretic masks exist. Well, why not theoretic religions? Theoretic temporal philosophies. See, you guys have lost your way if you start to think that science and math, quite frankly, make up the entirety of reality. I think this is weak thinking. I think you've failed to realize that many times around you, there's miracles happening all the time. You've turned off to them. Okay. Yeah, you can buy into a particular philosophy that suggests that everything is mere coincidence. So much so that when the most miraculous events occur in your life, you can't even see them for what they are. I believe that exists. Pragmatists do it all the time. The materialist atheist perspective suggests that one should just give up on their thinking. Just throw it out the window. I mean, what's the point, right? Yeah, but it's a lot deeper than that. You failed to experience this concept that perhaps it's an internal dialogue. You get to decide, how do I want to decorate it? Perhaps if you break free from sort of, one would argue, the matrix reality or the framework of being, and you see that contract law, the exchange between fundamental people and all the layers that we put on things with materialism. I know at first it seems like superficial, but no, you know, our relationships with each other are fundamentally decided by financial, legal, social, political, many external things that, quite frankly, in the moment don't matter. Things that you can just, in the poof of an eye, in the moment, can totally remove. Totally remove from any type of matter-of-fact thinking. Again, is the pragmatist decorating his reality with pragmatism? Is the atheist applying atheist thinking to the nature of being? Or, quite reflexively, is the mystic overthinking and seeing superficialism and everything? Which, quite frankly, could be the case. But, again, I don't think that's the argument we hear much of. All of those things equally can be true at once. This proponent is so unique. What if it's you that's fucking deciding everything? Sorry for swearing. What if you decided everything? Every moment of every day, your unconscious mind, or subconscious as Jung would call it, or it's helping to interact with you. Your amygdala, your medulla oblongata, this whole limbic sort of world is decorated by your thinking. Now, many thinkers before me have purported these things, but I think the most interesting is, are we looking at a particle, or are we looking at a wave? Don't get too campy. Don't bury yourself in your thinking. Break free. Look at other opportunities. Maybe it's you. Maybe you have decorated this world with the things that you find interesting. And frankly, if you find things interesting that are sensational and they're of a certain mindset, then you could quite clearly shift into that very reality. Again, even the Gnostic would purport that there's different ways of seeing that potential. The potential could be one of, I'm just the only thing in existence. don't think that would be it, but perhaps we're all in our own bubble. That's also a possibility. Another possibility that's quite frankly very interesting is there's only a finite number of channels, and sort of upon the horizon of our own individual magic globe, if you will, we kind of decide what comes over the horizon with our intuition and our intentions and our feelings, our emotions, and our personal affections. What do you find interesting? Do you like drama? Do you like horror? Do you like things all matter of fact and laid out? Or do you like things sensational and superficial? I mean, the world at large today can decorate this canvas in itself. One could see various nuance from one way of thinking to another. So this arrives us back at the start, a full circle. Both, you have, rational, idealist, guardian, artisan. I feel like the guardian is holding us back in order to keep us safe and not let us fly too far off into our imagination, when the artist is reaching forward to new possibilities, creating the landscape of what is to come, and quite frankly, possibly even able to see the future. Love you guys. Hope to see you again. Take care.